habitats. So on science on page 211, we're going to read together. We're just going to try with these first few students. If it doesn't work out, then I'll just go back to talking. But I'm afraid that me just talking the whole time, people get bored and kind of check out. They're messing with stuff. So, but we're all going to follow along on page 211. We're going to start with Zuri. So Zuri, will you read the first paragraph under land habitats on page 211? Go ahead.
If we were to travel the world, we could find a variety of habitats because there are different climates. We would dry habitats and wet habitats. Some habitats are very cold, while others are very hot.
Perfect. So habitats, remember, are the places where animals and plants live. Land habitats are the ones out of water. Bonus question, does anybody remember the 2 water habitats that we learned about last week? Anybody? Kasha? I'm going to start calling on people who aren't paying attention. Does anybody remember the water habitats that we talked about last week? Malachi, give it a shot.
We talked about some. So we could talk about the stream, and that's a water habitat, and a river.
That's true.
Like fresh water and salt water.
There we go. Fresh water and salt water. So anything that's not those is a land habitat. We talked about the climate, which means the weather. All right, Emiko, you can read the next paragraph. Hit it.
Habitats come in all sizes. Even a leaf could be a habitat for a
Microscopic, very good.
Creature or a tiny insect. We will learn about some very large habits.
Very good. All right, so the first land habitat. Ben, will you read about the prairie?
A prairie is a flat grassland. Grasslands have more grasses than any other kinds of plants, so they are larger and open. There are few trees or larger plants. You might have learned about the grasslands of the American savanna.
The African?
The African savanna with its lions, giraffes, and zebras. However, you will find very different animals on the Great Plains of North America.
Perfect. So the prairies are broad, flat areas with mostly grass and no trees. Do you think the prairies are easy places for birds to live in? No, Zuri? Why not? Why don't you think that?
Because number one, birds need nests to put eggs. Also, because birds need trees to find, like woodpeckers are birds. They need to get trees to peck for worms.
Yep. So birds often live in trees and get their food from trees. So if a bird was living on the prairies, it would have to nest on the ground, which is dangerous. So what kind of structures, or what was the word that we looked for a place where an animal lives? Does anybody remember what that's called? Caleb?
Habitat.
Yeah, but within the habitat, remember those 4 places? There was space, water, food, and what was the last part? Starts with the S. Caleb?
Shelter.
Shelter. What kind of shelter might an animal create on the prairie, the flat grassland? Malachi, what do you think they might do?
Well, some birds, like a prairie chicken or a grouse, might make a ground nest by digging it up.
Yeah, that's true. But even more than birds, what other kinds of shelters might you find on a prairie, Blake?
Like a cave?
Yeah, maybe. You might find lots of gophers or prairie dogs. What kind of shelter do they make on the prairies? Emiko?
They go in the grass or on a rock.
Maybe. But what gophers? Where do they go? Caleb?
In the ground.
Yeah, they dig a tunnel underground because there's no space to hide in the tree, so you dig underground. All right, page 212. Who hasn't read that wanted to read? Malachi? I'll go to you next, Blake. Malachi, will you read the first 2 paragraphs of page 212?
Okay. The prairies of the North America are in a temperate climate. That means the weather is not too hot or too cold. Most of the prairie has 4 seasons.
Perfect. Keep going.
At first glance, the open prairie seems like a poor place to find shelter. But God has given the animals living there instincts that help them find places to live. Some animals migrate from place to place to find food or have babies. Other animals burrow underground to make homes or hide in the tall prairie grasses.
Very good. So, some of them dig holes or some of them hide in the grasses. What do we call it when animals move from place to place? Does anybody remember what word that means? It starts with an M, a word that means from animals moving from place to place. Caleb?
Migration.
Migration. They migrate. So when it gets in December on the prairies, it gets cold, windy, and hail and sleet. And so Kasha can't deal with that. But Kasha can go in her house with nice warm clothes and PJs and eat some soup with grilled cheese. But if you're an animal, no dice. So you got to move. We call that migration. All right, Blake, you're up. Hit it.
Okay. A prairie has many grazers, or animals that depend on grasses for food. Do you remember what we call animals that eat only plants? Grazers or herbivores? Some grazers are the prairie are cattle, horses, and bison. A long time ago, a great many bison roamed a prairie. You might remember bison by another name. They are called buffalo.
Very good. Will you read that next little part, Blake?
Grazers such as bison travel in herds for protection. Large grazers are very important to grassland habitats.
Very good. So they travel in large groups for protection. What do we call large groups of grazers? It's a word that starts with an H. Emiko?
Habitat.
Good guess. No, it's another H word. Large group of grazers. I see you, Caleb. I'm trying to see if I can get some other people involved. A large group of grazers. There was a bunch of buffalo wandering together. What would we call that word? It starts with the H. Ziri.
Herd.
A herd. Now, they travel in a herd. Why? They just like each other. They want to hang out with all their bison buddies. Why do they travel in a herd? Caleb?
For protection.
For protection. Now, if any of you have ever watched like a nature movie, you'll see that the bison need the protection because there's other animals that hunt them. What do we call the animals that hunt grazers? Malachi?
We call them predators.
We call them predators. And the plants, the grazers, the predators are all what part of what thing? We call it the blank blank. It's how energy is transferred from animal to animal. Does anybody know besides Malachi or Caleb? Kasha, Taj, anybody? What do we call it when energy is transferred from the grass to the grazers to the predators? It has a specific term. Kasha?
Decompose.
That's a good guess. Decomposition is part of this. What's it called, Ben?
Chain.
It's the food chain, right? So the plants produce their own food and they are eaten by the grazers. Then some of the grazers are eaten by the predators. Then the predators eventually live their life and die, and they decompose back into the soil where they're absorbed by the plants. It's a food chain. All right, page 213. We're almost done, and you guys are doing great. Anybody else want to read? Emiko read. Is there anybody who hasn't read that would like to read? All right, Caleb, you're up. Page 213.
As they roam, their hooves not only press plant seeds into the soil so that seeds can grow, but also break up the soil so that it can absorb more rainwater. Grazing animals also help grass plants to grow stronger and gives the roots a chance to make new soil.
Keep on going. Do one more.
Pollinators such as butterflies and bees help the prairie as well. Each grass plant has tiny flowers. Pollinators help the grasses make new seeds. This causes the prairie to grow again each spring.
Nice. So pollinators are important. Why? Does anybody remember what pollinators do from when we talked about plants? Pollinators do something that helps plants. Emiko, you want to give it a shot? What's up?
They pollinate the flowers.
Yes, pollinators pollinate the flowers, but why is that important? What does it do? What does pollinating help the flowers do? Malachi?
It helps the flowers grow new seeds.
Perfect. So pollinators take the pollen from one plant to another plant. When the pollination happens, that pollen fertilizes the new flower, remember, and grows new seeds. So every plant has seeds, and so it needs pollinators, even grass. All right, last paragraph. Who wants to help me out? All right, Kasha, hit it. It's a grouse. A grouse is sometimes called a prairie chicken. On page 213.
A grouse is sometimes called a prairie chicken. Its coloring helps it to blend in with the prairie grasses. Where do you
think?
Where do you think this bird makes its nest?
Do you want to do another one?
Huh?
Keep on going.
Prairie dogs are actually rodents of the American prairies. Rodents are small mammals like rats, mice, and beavers. These rodents burrow under the prairie. Prairie dogs make underground burrows that connect with other prairie dogs' homes.
We're on this makes the shape.
Burrows are called prairie dog towns. They can stretch out for miles.
We're on the bottom one.
Nice work. All right. I'm sorry. I'm going to mute Kasha. So prairie dogs and the prairie chickens, also known as grouse, like Malachi was saying, they don't have trees to make their shelter in, so they got to make their shelter on the ground or below the ground. Now, the prairie chicken or the grouse has a certain type of color and pattern on its feathers. What do we call that when the outside of an animal is designed to blend in with its surroundings? Does anybody remember? Starts with a C. Taj?
Camouflage.
It's called camouflage. Very good. Now, why do you think the grouse needs to have camouflage? Is it a deadly secret assassin like Mr. Frazier? Why do you think, Zuri?
So they can protect themselves.
So they can protect themselves, right? Because they may not be super fast like a gazelle, and grouse can't fly for far distances like a duck or a pigeon. They can fly for short distances, so they need that camouflage to hide from predators. Yes, Emiko, do you have a question? 1 second. Come on, unmute.
Can I read the Bible says?
The Bible says? Sure.
Okay. That caused the grass to grow for the cattle and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth.
Psalm 104:14. That's saying the Lord causes all of the life to exist. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle. He causes the cattle to grow for the predators. All right, last section, page 214. We'll start from the top. Zuri, you ready to read page 214? God's plan for food and water. Hit it, Zuri.
Grasshoppers, locusts, and other insects are an important part of the prairie dog food chain. Birds, amphibians, reptiles, and small animals all depend on them for food. Too many locusts could eat all the prairie grasses and other producers. That is why God created the animals that eat them.
All right, so if there are too many locusts, they could eat all of the plants. Remember, locust was one of the plagues that God sent to Egypt. What do we call it when there are not too many of one thing in a habitat? Do you remember there was a word that we used when a habitat has just the right amount of producers and predators and consumers? It starts with a B. It's a word that means everything is in its order. Caleb?
Balanced.
Balanced. Why do you think it's important, Caleb, for a habitat to be balanced?
So one animal doesn't eat all the food that another animal depends on?
Yeah, very good. Because if there's too much of one animal or too much of one thing, then it'll mess things up for the other animals. This even happens with humans, right? Humans go into a situation, if they cut down all of the trees and blow up the habitat for the animals, there's too many humans, that means there's not enough resources for the deer or whatever. So it's important to have a balanced habitat. Too many locusts, they eat up all of the plants, then the grazers start to starve, and that means there's not enough food for the predators. It all goes to heck in a handbasket. Last paragraph. Who's up? Emiko? Sorry, Emiko. Your unmute button, for whatever reason, does not like me. All right, Emiko, hit it. Last paragraph.
Prairie dogs and other small animals of the prairie eat insects, grass, and other plants. Prairie dogs are an important part of many food chains. On a prairie dog, they are the main food source for many predators, such as losts,
Such as
eagles,
falcons?
falcons, eagles, coyotes, badgers, and
Ferrets. Ferrets. All right, I guess I was lying. There's one more paragraph. Who wants to read it? Malachi, finish us off strong, buddy.
Okay. Prairie dogs. Prairie dogs. Oh wait.
Yep, you're right. Prairie dogs
dogs
protect
and-
each other.
Prairie dogs protect each other from predators by standing on their hind legs and sounding up a sharp bark.
Perfect. All right, that is all of the